Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. From the Legislative Building here in Regina, we have Premier Scott Moe. As well, joining us on the line is Saskatchewan's Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Gordon Wyant, and Saskatchewan's Minister of Environment, Warren Kading. Premier Moe will have opening remarks before we move on to questions.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to Warren Kading, Gordon Wyant, who have joined us on the telephone here, our Minister of Justice and Minister of Environment. And good afternoon it is now, and I want to begin my remarks with some historical context of what brought us to where we are here today. And you may recall back a few years ago in October of 2016, Canada's environment ministers, myself included at the time, we gathered in Montreal to discuss climate change initiatives. And one of the reasons we attended that meeting was to come up with a collaborative approach, provinces and the nation of Canada and our territories, to carbon pricing in this nation. A policy that would work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while respecting provincial jurisdiction and recognizing the unique characteristics of each region across this great nation. We came together as environment ministers on that day with the very best of intentions, and we came together in the spirit of collaboration to build a strong partnership to deal with climate change as a nation. But at the very moment that we were meeting in 2016, at that very same time when we sat down in Montreal, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he rose in the House of Commons to announce that the federal government would unilaterally impose a carbon tax on all of the provinces and territories. This was a stunning betrayal of the Prime Minister's promise to premiers to work in a cooperative fashion on climate change. A promise that he had made just a few months prior at the First Ministers' meeting in Vancouver, where all 13 premiers of the provinces and territories, they signed the Vancouver Declaration, an agreement to work together as Canadians to address climate change and to respect provincial diversity. This was the last climate change agreement that was signed by all premiers, representing collectively all Canadians in the nation. And in Saskatchewan, we saw the federal carbon tax for, quite frankly, what it was and what it is today. It's a blunt, ineffective instrument that kills jobs and threatens our energy-intensive industries. We knew that we had to do all that we could to stop this federal carbon tax, or at least we had to do everything that we could to try. Because standing up for Saskatchewan people is always a fight that's worth having. About 3 years ago, the province then launched a constitutional challenge. We argued that the federal government overstepped its jurisdiction by imposing this carbon tax on Saskatchewan residents and Canadians in general. Ontario and Alberta, they launched their own constitutional challenges. And our case was heard in the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal, and after a split decision in Saskatchewan and in Ontario and a ruling against the federal government in Alberta, the case then went on to the Supreme Court of Canada. Today, the Supreme Court has released its judgment. The court has ruled that the federal government does have the constitutional authority to impose a carbon tax on the hardworking people that I represent in this province of Saskatchewan. The ruling does come with a strong dissenting opinion, one that warns that the decision has far-reaching implications for further federal intrusion into areas of provincial jurisdiction. For example, in his dissenting opinion, Justice Brown wrote, and I quote, "This is a model of federalism that rejects our Constitution and rewrites the rules of Confederation." He goes on to say its implications go far beyond the carbon tax law, opening the door to federal intrusion by way of the imposition of national standards into all areas of provincial jurisdiction, including interprovincial trade and commerce, health, and the management of natural resources. He goes on, "It is bound to lead to serious tensions in the Federation," end quote. It's a very sobering warning from a Supreme Court justice. While today's decision does effectively end our legal avenues as a province, it does not end our opposition to this costly and ineffective tax. And just because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has the legal right to impose a carbon tax, I would say that it doesn't mean that he should. Today's decision does not make the federal carbon tax any less punitive for Saskatchewan seniors that are living on fixed incomes. Today's decision does not make the federal carbon tax any less punitive for single moms that are putting gas in their tank to take their kids to daycare, for small farming operations who have to dry their grain and face higher natural gas and propane bills. Today's decision does nothing to reduce the growing uncertainty for businesses that bear the brunt of this tax. In agriculture, in energy, in mining, in forestry, in manufacturing, all industries employing Saskatchewan people. And this decision does not in any way invalidate our government's position that there is a much better way to address climate change. And we are showing that here in this province. Through our Prairie Resilience Climate Change Strategy, for example. We are showing that by expanding renewable energy in Saskatchewan and by investing in technology such as carbon capture and enhanced oil recovery. Working with other provinces, we are at the moment to advance the development of small modular nuclear reactors and continuing to lead the world in agricultural innovation that not only reduces emissions but sequesters carbon in our Saskatchewan soils and now through exports in soils around the world. The Supreme Court decision does not change our core conviction that the federal carbon tax is bad environmental policy, it's bad economic policy, and it just simply is wrong. It's simply wrong to force Saskatchewan families to pay a tax on fuel that they may use to heat their homes or to drive their kids to school. It's simply wrong for the federal government to impose a tax that will increase the cost of virtually everything that we purchase, from groceries to clothes to cars. And it's simply wrong to punish Saskatchewan companies who employ Saskatchewan people whose competitors operating in other jurisdictions are all too often operating without the imposed carbon tax. To impose this heavy burden on Saskatchewan without demonstrating that a carbon tax will in any measurable way effectively reduce emissions in this province, it's just simply wrong. The Supreme Court's decision is very unfortunate today, but it is a reality that we must deal with. Today, our government is focused on making every effort to protect Saskatchewan families, protect Saskatchewan workers, and to protect our businesses from the negative consequences of this federal carbon tax. Here are some of the measures that we will take in the months ahead to ensure that we can forge our own path as we deal with those imposed consequences. First, we will bring electrical generation and our natural gas transmission, our Sask Power and Sask Energy companies, under the provincial greenhouse gas emissions regulations that are now under development. Currently, Sask Power and Sask Energy operate under the federal rules. Under provincial legislation, we will have more control over the regulations that they operate under, and we will have more flexibility in how carbon tax revenues are then distributed. A request has already been made dating back to February the 4th to the Federal Environment Minister for this to occur, and to occur retroactively, dating back to January 1st, 2019. Second, the government will submit a proposal that will see Saskatchewan design its own carbon pricing system for fuel, a system that will be similar to the one the federal government has approved in the province of New Brunswick, and it would be our expectation that the federal government would approve Saskatchewan's proposal. This would provide an immediate rebate right at the pump to Saskatchewan people. Third, Saskatchewan will develop a greenhouse gas offset program as an option for regulated industries to meet their annual emission reduction target. Under the program, companies could buy carbon credits from farmers, from ranchers, from our forestry operators, from municipalities and other businesses that may have the opportunity to sequester carbon. The Ministry of Environment is conducting these consultations and will continue throughout this year, and the program should be in place sometime in 2022. Fourth, we will be asking the federal government to support the development of small modular nuclear reactors in this nation. As you know, Saskatchewan and Ontario are teaming up with New Brunswick and very shortly Alberta to advance small modular reactor technology. This literally is game-changing technology and one we would ask the federal government to participate in. SMRs could be used to provide clean, emissions-free power in many remote communities in this province and in this nation, where they now currently rely on diesel to generate their electricity. They could be deployed in industries to power mines, to power factories, and to power refineries, as well as small communities. And in a province with a smaller electrical grid like ours in Saskatchewan, SMRs make much more sense than large nuclear reactors. And finally, we are asking the federal government to provide Saskatchewan with its fair share of funding from the federal Low Carbon Economy Fund, which to this point has not been provided, it's been withheld. Each and every province and territory has benefited from this initiative. Saskatchewan has not, because we chose not to sign a pan-Canadian framework agreement that included the imposition of a carbon tax. By our estimate, our province should now receive $126 million from the Low Carbon Economy Fund. We would ask for that to be submitted shortly. We've already submitted a number of projects that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 190 million tons over their lifespan. The federal government, I would say, should treat all Canadians fairly. We should not treat Canadians differently. And we would ask that they provide this low carbon economy funding to the province of Saskatchewan immediately. In closing, I would just take a moment to thank the legal counsel who presented our case before the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal, as well as before the Supreme Court of Canada. They did an outstanding job. And I would also take this moment to thank all other intervening provinces, as well as all other intervening organizations and associations. Your support is appreciated. And I want to thank as well to all members of our government who oversaw this effort over the course of the last number of years on behalf of the people in this province and so many across the nation. And most importantly, I want to say thank you to the people of the province of Saskatchewan. I can't tell you the number of emails, the number of phone calls, the letters that we have received over the course of the last number of years that have supported Saskatchewan's effort to stop this federal carbon tax from being imposed on them and their families. This federal carbon tax that is undeniably harmful to the residents of this province. For that, I am forever grateful, and for your support, I thank you. Those letters and those letters of support came from every corner of this province. They came from rural areas, they came from towns, they came from cities, and it was your support that gave us the confidence that our case and our cause was just. And you gave us the confidence and the will and the understanding that standing up for Saskatchewan is always the right thing to do, and it still is today. And that's why we continue and will continue to take every measure to protect the people that we serve in this great province. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to take those at this time.
Just as a reminder for all media, we will use the one question, one follow-up format. We'll take questions now, and we'll start on the line. Operator?
We have Emma Graney with the Globe and Mail.
Yeah, g'day, Premier. You mentioned there about the low carbon economy money, and you'd like to pursue some of that from Ottawa. So does that mean that Saskatchewan will now sign on to that pan-Canadian agreement so that it can access those funds?
Well, as the case has been decided today by the Supreme Court of Canada, we will be putting forward a proposal that will complete the transition from what would be an imposed federal carbon tax on Saskatchewan residents, fuel tax essentially, and transition that to a made in Saskatchewan solution to ensure that, yes, as much as we disagree with the decision that has come today, we do respect the decision that has come today. So we'll be moving forward with a proposal similar to what we see in New Brunswick, so that we are able to return as much of that charge as possible immediately, right at the pumps, to Saskatchewan people. And we would ask that the federal government would provide the low carbon economy funding that Saskatchewan is due. We've estimated that to be at about $126 million. That would be the amount that, we have submitted a number of projects that most certainly will reduce emissions into the future here in this province. So in the spirit of collaboration, we would ask the federal government to provide that funding so that we can move forward with a number of different projects that we have submitted to continue to reduce emissions here in the province, like we have all the while that we've had this legal discussion around the constitutionality of a fuel charge here in this province and across the nation. We've moved forward with the federal government on equivalency in our electrical emissions, electrical generation emissions, for example, recognizing the investment that Saskatchewan has made in carbon capture and storage and providing that carbon to the function of enhanced oil recovery here in the province. We've also signed an equivalency agreement with the federal government when it comes to methane reductions in our energy industry. And Saskatchewan is likely not only leading the nation, but leading North America in the efforts and investments that are being made in the energy industry and reducing our methane emissions. We worked with the federal government on our output-based heavy emitter plan here in Saskatchewan, which was replicated in other provinces across the nation as well. So we recognize the decision that's here today. We will be moving forward with the proposal to replace the federal carbon tax with a Made in Saskatchewan solution. And we'd ask the federal government to treat Saskatchewan residents fairly, and like they have provided in the Low Carbon Economy Fund to every other Canadian. They should provide it to the Saskatchewan residents as well.
Follow up, Emma?
Yeah, I actually do. It is on a different topic. I'm going to be cheeky, but I'm doing it anyway. How worried are you about the massive rise in COVID cases in Saskatchewan, particularly variants, and why did you not do something sooner to prevent that?
There is a rise in COVID cases in the city of Regina and the surrounding communities. The rest of the province actually has been on a very steady trajectory down. And so we do have a high concentration of variants in and around the Regina area. That's why we have taken some very localized action in the city of Regina and the surrounding communities. But contrary to your question, the vast majority of the province and the bulk of the rest of the province has been on a very steady trajectory down, not only in daily COVID cases, but reducing in many cases the hospitalizations and some of the severe outcomes. And we are working very hard to ensure that our vaccination plan and our vaccination effort is going very well, where we are very low on vaccines again here today, providing vaccines to all sorts of the province. And we redirected, for example, our AstraZeneca vaccines into the community of Regina to make every effort to get ahead of the variant in the race between vaccines and variants. And we were, if not the first province, one of the first provinces to exhaust our AstraZeneca supply in what I would say was a very successful drive-through vaccination clinic here in Regina, doing some days in excess of 2,000 people. So we do have a concentration of variants in Regina that has caused us to increase our public health measures, to redirect a number of vaccines into the Regina and surrounding area. But the rest of the province is on a very different trajectory.
We'll take another question on the line. Operator?
We have Brian Lilly with the Toronto Sun.
Premier, you seem to maybe be answering my question in that you're going to look to change to a Made in Saskatchewan solution for putting a price on carbon. I do note in the decision that Justice Wagner, in defending it, went to great pains to talk about the minimal impairment, or the minimum price on carbon that the Greenhouse Gas Protection Act imposed. So do you have any concerns that, or I guess you're going to take advantage of the fact that, like Quebec and New Brunswick, you can go to a lower level than what you would under the federal one?
We do have some concerns around a number of items that are highlighted in some of the minority justices' reports, and I mentioned one in my opening statement. I'll maybe quote another one here as well, and it goes on. Maybe I'll quote it and then I'll make a few comments. But it's from Justice Rowe, I believe, and I quote: "The framework adopted results in a new, distinctly hierarchical and supervisory model of Canadian federalism that subjects provincial legislative authority to Parliament's overriding authority to establish national standards of how much authority may be exercised and replaces the constitutionally mandated division of powers with a judicially struck balance of power which must account for other interests. No province, and not even Parliament itself, ever agreed to or even contemplated either of these features. This is a model of federalism that rejects the Constitution and rewrites the rules of Confederation. Its implications go far beyond the Act, opening the door to federal intrusion by way of the imposition of national standards, to your point, minimum standards, into all areas of provincial jurisdiction, including interprovincial trade and commerce, health, and the management of natural resources. It is bound to lead to serious tensions in the Federation and all for no good reason, since Parliament could have achieved its goals in constitutionally valid ways. So I would have some concerns with respect to the minimum standards, or to as to, and I think all Canadians, in fairness, should have some concerns with respect to this decision that are highlighted by the dissenting reports that are present. They should have concerns that the federal government may take this decision and may start to look at imposing its will into other areas that are constitutionally protected, and areas of provincial jurisdiction. So as we move forward, I would say a couple of things. The federal government really has an opportunity here. This carbon tax policy that they had brought forward is a very divisive policy, not just in Canada, but in other areas of North America and around the world. But I would also say that the way the federal government brought this policy forward, the way they enacted the policy, was equally as divisive. If they are looking towards truly working collaboratively with the provinces in the weeks and the months and however long they have the opportunity to serve, and we do here in Saskatchewan, they should take a different course and actually work collaboratively with the provinces on these policies. When it comes to climate change, all provinces are on board with doing what we can, respecting our individual situations in our respective provinces, but all are on board with investing in cleaner environment, cleaner infrastructure. For example, here in Saskatchewan, we led with investment in CCS. We've worked collaboratively with industry and the federal government on methane reduction emissions targets that the federal government had agreed to with the previous Obama administration. And I would say we're leading, if not the world, leading North America for sure, in the efforts that are being made on the western side of this province in reducing methane emissions, which we know are 26 times more problematic than carbon dioxide. So there is an opportunity here for the federal government to have a real hard look at the dissenting opinions that are here, and to take a step forward, a step that I would say Canadians would expect them to take, and that is to truly think back to the last climate agreement that was signed by all provincial, territorials, and federal leaders in this nation, was the Vancouver Declaration. We have an opportunity to move forward in the spirit that the leaders left that room with at that point in time, and to truly work together when it comes to healthcare, for example, that is provided, constitutionally protected by the provinces, but is funded in part by the federal government. We have the opportunity to work together, like we have in the equivalency agreements that we have signed, and not to move forward in a unilateral fashion, like the federal government did on this very divisive policy, moving forward in a very divisive way.
Follow up, Brian?
The Prime Minister is currently, as part of the response to COVID-19, talking about moving into national standards on long-term care. He has long talked about increasing national standards in terms of healthcare, even though so far there's been no move to boost the funding from the federal government to where he has talked about before. Do you see them using this if there is a discussion at your First Ministers meetings and premiers say, no, we don't want to go with your national standards? Do you see him using the precedent set by this decision to impose them?
That is exactly what I think all Canadians should be concerned of, is that the federal government would use this decision here today to expand their reach and to expand their unilateral powers, which I don't believe they have, even with this decision, into areas such as healthcare. But that is identified by Justice Rowe in his dissenting report, as that is an area that the federal government should not most certainly consider. But understanding his dissenting opinion did not agree with the majority opinion that was put forward by the Supreme Court of Canada today. I would hope and I would ask that the federal government would not they would look at what has occurred through the course of the last 3 to 4 years with this very divisive policy, yes, but look at how they enacted this policy in a unilateral fashion rather than working very collaboratively with provinces, the opportunity is there. The opportunity is there in healthcare. The opportunity is there in the discussion around climate change. And I would say that the opportunity has been on other topics in climate change has been embraced by the provinces and the federal government. This would be a good time for the federal government to just reassess in how they engage with the provinces, how they engage with cooperative federalism, look at how they have handled and enacted what was a very divisive policy in a very divisive way, how they have done that, and not to repeat that into the future. Because if they were to move forward in a similar way on long-term care standards, I suspect that there would be some serious opposition from many provinces, including Saskatchewan.
We'll take our next question in the room. Lisa?
This has been a fight that's gone on for years. Put a lot of time, money, effort into it, and apparently it was all for naught. We see this decision coming out. So was this a mistake?
Pardon me, what was the last question?
Was engaging in this fight a mistake?
Most certainly not. You know, standing up and representing the people of this province is never a mistake. Most certainly, this was a battle that was for the right reasons. We have over 2/3 of Saskatchewan residents that have always felt that this is an ineffective way to actually reduce emissions. It in many ways just reduces jobs in many of our communities, and I agree with them. I agree with over 2/3 of Saskatchewan people. So I will never apologize for standing up for the people that I represent in this great province. Most certainly, today, in light of this decision, we respect that the Supreme Court has ruled. We don't agree with the ruling, but I've played enough hockey to know that we're not going to do a lot of fruitful arguing with the referees after the game is over. So most certainly, we're going to be moving forward on a number of fronts that I had mentioned, and most notably, I think, is we're going to replace we're going to put in a proposal to the federal government, which we expect them to replace Justin Trudeau's carbon tax with a made-in-Saskatchewan solution that ultimately we will be able to return those dollars to Saskatchewan people immediately and right at the pump.
Follow-up?
That Made in Saskatchewan plan, that's something that critics of this fight have been saying the government should have just done anyway, should have just done that at the beginning, then you wouldn't have had to go through all this effort and money, and now you're basically back to that same spot, a Made in Saskatchewan plan.
No, this effort was very much worthwhile. When you look at all of the courts that this has been in, the judges have ruled about a 14 in favor of the federal government, 10 against the federal government in favor of the provinces. Most certainly, this was the right discussion and the right battle to have. We felt that on behalf of the people of this province. That's why we took it right to the to the highest court in the land. It most certainly remains an ineffective policy. That's why we are going to put forward proposals now that the highest court in the land has ruled, the Supreme Court has ruled. We are going to put forward a policy that continues to the greatest degree we are able, protect Saskatchewan jobs, protect Saskatchewan families. It doesn't mean that we agree with the policy. It doesn't mean that we think the policy is in any way effective. Other policies that we work with, yes, the federal government on, as well as our industries here in the province, are far more effective than this will ever be in actually achieving the targets and the goal that we all want. And that is to, one, reduce our emissions, yes. Two, to enhance the sequestration opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan and across Canada. So this most certainly, was the correct fight to have with the federal government, to go to the Supreme Court, to ask for clarification on the Constitution. It is going to precipitate some additional discussion, I'm sure, in the weeks and the months ahead. But I'll never apologize. I will never, ever apologize for standing up for what Saskatchewan people believe.
We'll take our next question on the line. Operator?
We have Murray Mandrick with Leader Post.
Good afternoon, sir. I am trying to understand how a rebate at the pump will be any more an efficient way of reducing greenhouse gases than the current carbon tax that was rightly criticized for not really reducing greenhouse gases in the province. Can you explain how it's going to work any better?
Well, first of all, I don't think this policy, carbon tax policy, in any way does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It moves them to other areas of the world where they don't have a carbon tax and where they have much lower environmental policy, and we actually likely have a net increase of greenhouse gas emissions, and we have less Canadian and Saskatchewan jobs. So it does not reduce emissions. What does reduce emissions is investment in technology, investment and time spent with industries to ensure that they are making investments in the correct technologies, like I've mentioned a number of them here earlier. So what we are doing now is we are going to submit a proposal similar to, as I mentioned, what was submitted in the province of New Brunswick, where about 65% of the rebate is provided right at the pump rather than on your tax receipt at the end of the year, so that those people that are using the fuel will see some of that rebate immediately by not paying a higher price for fuel like they are today with the federal carbon tax in place. And then the other 35%, we will quickly look for methods and avenues to return it to Saskatchewan people as quickly as possible.
Follow-up, Murray?
But cheaper gas just encourages people to use more fuel, and that was the problem with the carbon tax. So once again, in answering my question, and as per Lisa's question, I think if this was a good idea, why was it not proposed earlier? And once again, how is it a good idea if all you're doing is giving people more incentive to use more gas that's going to create more greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, a good idea would be to not have this federally imposed carbon tax on anyone in the nation. A good idea would be to work collaboratively between the provinces and the federal government on how we can reduce emissions. We have people in this province that are fueling up their vehicles so that they can go to work, so that they can take their children to school, so that they can take their children to the recreational facilities in a post-COVID environment. We most certainly hope there are more of that. More of that opportunity. We have people that have their furnaces on and have for the last 6 or 8 months here in this province that most certainly don't have a choice as to whether or not they can actually utilize fuel or not. So we don't believe this is an effective policy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And to that point, the federal government has not put forward any relevant data that says that it actually is an effective policy in reducing greenhouse gases here in the province. We have our heavy emitter program, our output-based program, that is where we work very closely with our specific industries in this province on what is achievable in their industry so that they can remain competitive in their industry with competitors around the world, but also so that they can achieve what is achievable in emissions reductions here in Saskatchewan. It's different for different industries, recognizing where they are, recognizing previous investments that they have made. And for example, the potash that comes from Saskatchewan, and this is something I make known to our customers all around the world on trade missions. I did this morning on a Zoom call. Our potash in Saskatchewan is not only among the highest quality that you can purchase, it's not only competitively priced, but it's the most sustainable potash that you can buy in the world from a greenhouse gas perspective. That's because of the investments in that industry in reducing their emissions, because of the investments in that industry that have happened over a number of years. And we have put together a plan that recognizes the previous, current, and future investments in an industry just like that. I can go on with our energy industry investments in methane reductions, in carbon capture and storage, and enhanced oil recovery. I can go on with what is happening in sequestration and agriculture, or never mind the engine technology that is being used in agriculture and the emissions reductions that we are experiencing there. We have a great story to tell in Saskatchewan. It isn't one that we would like to tell about imposing a carbon tax on Saskatchewan people, but most notably, and certainly now, we do respect the Supreme Court's decision here today, and we'll be moving forward within the confines that we can to ensure that we are, yes, in compliance with the federal government's act, but also doing everything that we possibly can to protect every job and family in this province.
Other question on the line, operator?
We have Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press.
Mr. Premier, how is this a made in Saskatchewan plan when it seems that you're going to just be doing what New Brunswick brought in, more than a year ago? So how is this in any way a made in Saskatchewan plan?
We have the output-based plan that we've worked on with the federal government that is currently in place. We're asking SaskPower and Sask Energy to have already requested the federal government to retroactively move those entities into the the output-based program that we have here in Saskatchewan. Yes, we're going to replace Justin Trudeau's carbon tax with this Made in Saskatchewan fuel plan, but we're also asking the federal government to participate actively in the memorandum of understanding and the progressing technology that we're fostering with New Brunswick and Ontario and Alberta when it comes to enhancing the technology around small modular reactors. Saskatchewan has a great hand to play in this, as we provide the uranium not only to Canadian provinces that utilize nuclear power, but we provide uranium to many countries around the world that also are utilizing nuclear power. That is one part of the plan that we have put forward here today. The carbon credit plan that we have put forward will be unique to Saskatchewan. The Minister Kading is actively working on, and we will be consulting with a number of different industries this summer. And Warren, I might ask you just to comment on the carbon credit plan that you're working on, as it most certainly is unique to Saskatchewan, as are a number of these initiatives that we have put forward. But most certainly, the piece that you had referenced with respect to replacing the federal fuel tax is but one portion of the plan that we will be moving forward with over the course of the next number of months. Warren, are you there to just speak very briefly to the carbon credit plan you're working on?
Certainly. No, thank you, Premier. And yes, we're just in the process of consulting with our stakeholders, everyone from agriculture to our emitters, to anyone that may be involved in developing a protocol to take advantage of the offsets and the offset market that is going to be available in Saskatchewan, nationally, and internationally. So we're just opening that up now for input, and fully expect to have some protocols accepted for implementation in 2022.
Follow-up, Steph?
Mr. Premier, what is the plan for grain drying when it comes to farmers under what you're proposing in Saskatchewan's plan?
Well, part of our submission on the fuel, that would fall under the fuel plan, the fuel that's currently being charged the federal government's fuel tax. We most certainly, not only with grain drying, but with many other types of fuel that are being utilized, we will be looking to one, exempting them if it's possible, and two, we'll be looking towards refunding as much of the carbon tax as possible right at the outset, to provide that incentive to producers at the time of purchase rather than at the time of them filling out their income tax forms.
We'll take our next question in the room. Adam?
Is there anything part of the proposal to deal with renewables like wind, solar, geothermal when you submit it to the federal government? I'm thinking also about, Sask Power, you talked about bringing that out. Is that part of this at all? Or investing in those with the money that's going to be hopefully kept in Saskatchewan under your new plan?
So first of all, that is where the low carbon economy investments would go. And Gord, I might just rely on you for some of your history as Sask Power Minister, if you recall specifically maybe what some of those investments or the themes of those investments that were submitted to the federal government by Sask Power and others, Sask Energy, over the course of the last couple of years that we have been trying to collect our fair share of the Low Carbon Economy Fund, which totals now about $126 million. So those are the first rounds of investments that would be made with federal support, and that is why we ask the federal government to provide that low carbon economy fund to Saskatchewan residents through the Saskatchewan government. They've provided it to all other provinces and territories, and we would ask that they treat Saskatchewan residents, who are still Canadians, in an equal fashion as they've treated everyone else. But Gord, do you recall specifically some of the early submissions we had on and the structure of the Low Carbon Economy Fund and how it could be utilized?
Well, there's certainly a number of, Premier, thanks very much. There's certainly a number of opportunities to utilize utilize the fund to fund a number of projects relates to generally with respect to reducing our costs. We had put forward a number of projects last year, and we can certainly get the particulars of them to people that are interested. But certainly access to the Low Carbon Economy Fund is going to be critical for us kind of moving forward to help achieve the goals which we've set for ourselves. But there have been a number of projects that have been put forward, a number recently and a number in the past, where we've looked to utilize utilize the Low Carbon Economy Fund if and when it becomes available to us.
I would just add to that, and I think I added in my notes, I think it was over the lifespan of the submissions that we had put forward to the federal government, we would offset about 190 million tons of carbon over the lifespan of those projects. So it's significant. It's a significant investment, much of it in renewables or in reducing emissions. And you add to that the interest and the eye that Saskatchewan has, as well as other provinces, towards technology like SMR technology, carbon capture and storage. I think we can agree we're all headed in the right direction around this conversation about reducing emissions and enhancing our sequestration opportunities. Where we have always had disagreement has been around taxing families and taxing jobs to the point that they might leave this jurisdiction.
Follow-up, Adam?
As Environment Minister in 2017, you said that Saskatchewan will never allow a carbon tax. I don't know if you remember making those comments, but this has been something that you've been fighting for quite a long time. You became leader and premier. How do you feel now coming to today where there's a finality to it, and now Saskatchewan's going to have its own plan, but it's, as you say, being imposed in a way?
Well, I think there's a couple of feelings I have. One, I think it's unfortunate that the ruling has come down in this way for a number of reasons. One, I think it's an ineffective policy. I think from, in some areas of the nation, it may be an effective policy, not in this area of the nation. Most certainly, as I've always said, it just simply will not on its own reduce emissions to any measurable amount in this province of Saskatchewan. And to the point where it does, it will drive those jobs away and drive them to other jurisdictions where ultimately there's not a carbon tax being charged, and there will be ultimately more emissions from whatever product is being produced in that other country. So I don't believe it is an effective policy from Saskatchewan's perspective. The other concern, there's many other ways for us to reduce emissions and really tackle climate change in a very tangible manner in this province, and we're more than willing to do just that. The other challenge that I see from this decision here today, and this is why I think you saw so many provinces step in and intervene on this case as it headed towards the Supreme Court of Canada, was with respect to the notes that I had quoted you from Justice Rowe's dissenting report on this decision, is it does open the door a crack for the federal government to ultimately look at using this decision to move its way into other areas of provincial jurisdiction. That will not come without opposition from the provinces. We most certainly don't feel that this is a decision that in any way changes Confederation or changes the Constitution, albeit there is that concern by some that this decision may start down that path, and we most certainly won't allow that to happen. In this province, as I said throughout this discussion with the federal government and now clarification by the Supreme Court of Canada, we will always stand up for the residents of Saskatchewan, and we most certainly are proud to do that, been proud to do that through this process, and will continue to do it into the future.
We'll take our next question on the line. Operator?
We have Karen Briere with the Western Producer.
Yes, hi. I'm just wondering, with the carbon tax scheduled to go up a week from today, how soon could you move ahead with a plan and actually have it approved?
Well, we will be submitting a plan shortly. We have already requested that our SaskPower, Sask Energy be removed retroactively from the federal carbon tax and ultimately be included under the provincial output heavy emitter plan. That letter was sent on February the 4th. To date, I have not seen an answer from the federal environment minister, but I would formally request him to answer that and to oblige with Saskatchewan's request. As he said, we would this morning absolutely work with provinces that are ready to move forward on collaboratively given the Supreme Court ruling that is here today. But you are correct. The carbon tax is going up to $40 here a ton in about a week. On its way not to stop at $50 that was originally committed to by the Prime Minister and the previous Environment Minister, but now is in a race to $170 over the course of the next number of years. Something, again, we said would happen, many said would happen, the federal government did not, but is now committed to increasing the carbon tax to over triple what they originally promised it would cap out at. So we'll be moving as quickly as we can to protect Saskatchewan people, to protect the families that we represent, and ultimately to protect the jobs in agriculture, in mining, in energy, in manufacturing, and right across this province from corner to corner. So I don't know how quickly the federal government will accept the proposals that we'll put before them, but the proposals will be put before them very swiftly.
Follow up, Karen?
Yes. If offsets are being developed as a way for farmers to participate in carbon markets going forward, I'm wondering why farmers who direct seed might be left out.
So just a quick follow-up to my last question as well. We would expect that the federal government would accept our proposals very, very rapidly because, one, they said they wanted to work with provinces, as I heard this morning from the federal Environment Minister, and two, our proposals will be similar to what we've seen in other provinces, and they've accepted those, and so we don't feel there should be much discussion with respect to what we will be submitting. With respect to offsets, and Warren, you might want to speak a little more in depth on this. We have the voluntary as well as the regulated offset market. Warren is having and his team are looking at how we can maximize the opportunity in both of those markets, not only for our ag producers, but also for our forestry industry, for carbon capture and storage, for others that are, in making investments to offset present and future emissions, of which we really commend, and we want to ensure that they have the ability to invest right here in Saskatchewan offsets. There are some challenges around some of the how we do business going back over the decades, and we're still looking into, I think, Warren, would be a fair assessment as to how we may be able to maximize some of the previous investment that agricultural producers in this province pioneered and have really brought forward in zero-till technology and innovation, and now are exporting that innovation to other areas of the world. And I would point you no further than to Bourgault Manufacturing. We have Seedhawk or Vaterstad now. We have Seedmaster. We have Morris Manufacturing. We have Pillar Laser Works. What was Frigstad, Flexicoil, CNH, all producing zero-till drills, not just for use here in Saskatchewan, but being used in neighboring provinces like Manitoba and Alberta, neighboring countries like in North Dakota, South Dakota, throughout the U.S., and now major players in foreign exports of this zero-till technology as well, showcasing at world-renowned agricultural shows like Agritechnica in Germany, as well as providing exports into places like Australia and even the Middle East. So, a great story to tell here in Saskatchewan. I think there's all sorts of opportunities for us to capitalize on not only what we are doing here in zero-till technology, in fuel conservation, in all of the innovation that agricultural fixing nitrogen in our pulse crops, for example, but all of the innovation that we have pioneered here in this province, and now are exporting in many cases that innovation to other places around the world. But Warren, do you have a little bit to add on just the immediate question around zero-till technology and the opportunities that we may or may not have there in the days ahead?
Certainly, no, and thank you, Premier. And certainly adding to your comments, with the direct seeding tillage equipment that's been developed in the province, we also have some world-leading technology on the GPS side, drone use, seed variety development for our own crop development center here in Saskatchewan. We've got a number of fertilizer manufacturers here that are using and maintaining some really great new innovative technology. So we're not precluding anything from protocol development and ultimately what may be accepted as offsets. I mean, it is literally an international market. They're going to determine what the value and what is accepted as an offset. So we certainly are not discouraging the private sector from participating in this. I would say there is going to be opportunity for commodity groups, producer groups, to put their heads together to determine what they may want to see as protocols. But it all has to be defensible, as Premier indicated. Has to be validated, verified. It has to be something that our emitters are willing to, since they're paying for it, that they can find credibility in what they're purchasing. So that's part of our consultation process now, is to hear from everyone involved to make sure that we've got the right offset there, and to make sure that we recognize the great things that agriculture is doing, like Premier said, like forestry is doing. I mean, we're even looking at offsets that might be developed from methane gas production out of landfills. So there is a lot of unique opportunities out there that we want to make sure we provide our residents with an opportunity to capitalize on that.
And Karen, we are making every effort to ensure that where there are opportunities to work with aggregators in the voluntary market, or opportunities to engage on the regulated market, that will be hopefully coming at some point down the road, that our Saskatchewan farmers will be recognized for every pound of carbon ultimately that they can be recognized for, because they have done a yeoman's effort with respect to sequestering carbon and organic matter in our soils in this province, one that we say should be recognized not only by Saskatchewan, Canada, and the world, but it should be recognized going back decades. So we're making every effort to do that. That being said, there is some challenges with respect to the understanding of exactly how valuable that effort has been, not only at our federal level, but the international level as well, and we're working to advocate on their behalf. We will continue to.
We'll take another question on the line. Operator?
We have Alex McPherson with the Star Phoenix.
Premier, you've said repeatedly over the years that the federal carbon tax disproportionately hurts Saskatchewan. Do you regret now not introducing the plan that you're talking about today 2 years ago, even while continuing the legal challenge of Ottawa's backstop?
No, this is a fight that needed to happen. There's clarity that is provided today, although we don't agree with it. There's clarity that is provided today on behalf of all Canadians by the Supreme Court of Canada. I believe there's also clarity provided to the federal government, and I said this earlier, just because you now do have the authority to enact a tax like this, a very divisive policy, it doesn't mean you always should. And there is an opportunity for us now to look back at how we got to this point, how the federal government, yes, a very divisive policy, but the method in which they enacted this policy was equally as divisive, to ensure that we actually are doing what Canadians expect us to do. Let's look at the different path that we took. Let's use Saskatchewan as the example. The different path that Saskatchewan took on signing the equivalency agreement around our coal-fired emissions in this province, because of the investment that we had made in carbon capture and storage and subsequent enhanced oil recovery that is occurring, taking carbon out of every barrel of oil that is being provided in the Weyburn-Midale oil field. Look at the effort that was made, collaborative effort by the province and the federal government and industries on the west side of this province in signing our methane equivalency agreement, ensuring at the end of the day we ultimately are reducing emissions at a industry-leading pace in that area through, yes, private investment, but collaboration between the federal government, the provincial government, and industry to ensure that that investment is not only profitable, but is world-leading investment in reducing methane emissions in that area of the province. So most certainly the clarity that was provided today is valuable for all Canadians. I think it is also to some degree concerning in some of the issues that I had raised earlier. So most certainly we respect the decision that is made today. We'll be moving forward in the appropriate fashion to do everything that we can to protect the people of this province and the jobs that we have within.
Follow-up, Alex?
Yes, Premier, you've made opposition to the federal carbon tax a key part of your political identity, almost from the second you were elected to lead this party. And I'm curious, now that the Supreme Court has ruled, Saskatchewan is moving forward with its plan, what do you feel your role is now when it comes to talking about climate change, given the reality that the Supreme Court announced this morning?
Well, my role is to represent the great people of Saskatchewan. It is to defend them when necessary. It's to advocate on their behalf. when that's required. But my role is most certainly to represent the people in the province that I am elected to represent. And that will continue. And that will continue on the topic of climate change. It will continue on the topic of market access around the world. It will continue on whatever topic is important to the people of this province. We've had significant investments into Saskatchewan just over the course of the last few days. Investments in the agri-food industry, in the fertilizer industry. We're very proud that we have an environment that is still in this very challenging environment of the COVID fog that we're all living in, is continuing to attract investments into our communities, into the very solid, sustainable industries that we have. So throughout the last number of years, whether it's been as an MLA, as a minister, or as a leader of our party in our province, I have always done everything that I can to represent the people of this province. I will defend them when necessary. That I have done throughout this carbon tax conversation, but I've also advocated on their behalfs where we are able to find common ground with the federal government. And I've mentioned a number of places on the climate change front, the equivalency agreements, for example, of where we've been able to do that. I mean, what we are saying in the weeks and months ahead is we will be working with the federal government so that we are in compliance with the act that the Supreme Court has said is constitutionally sound here today. But we most certainly, in doing so, are going to do everything we can to preserve and defend the families and the jobs of the people that we represent in this province. That's going to be front and foremost throughout the next number of weeks. And you're going to see that, and you will see that in the plan that I've put forward here today.
We'll take our final question on the line. Operator?
We have Kyle Benning with Global.
Good afternoon, Premier. I apologize if this question has already been asked. I had some technical difficulties joining the press conference earlier today. How much money did the provincial government spend throughout this legal challenge to the Supreme Court and I guess to lower courts as well?
Between $500,000 and $600,000 was the cost that the Saskatchewan government incurred. We used our own internal Ministry of Justice for the bulk of the work that has occurred. You might have something to add to this as well, Gord, but I would just state that we're very thankful and appreciative of the effort that all of our legal counsel had put forward. Gord, you and previous Minister Morgan have put forward in managing this file over the course of the last number of years. And I would extend that same appreciation to all that represented an intervener status in Saskatchewan's case and represented their own cases in their respective provinces and at the Supreme Court of Canada. I think this is a good thing that we have a system where we can question policies that are put in place, in this case by the federal government, question those policies to the highest court in the land. We do have a decision here today. As I said, I don't necessarily agree with that decision, but I also said I'm not going to spend a lot of time arguing with the referee. That hasn't worked out for me in my sporting career in years gone by, so we're not going to do it now. Most certainly, we are very thankful of the effort that everybody had put into this initiative and into this conversation. We will now be moving forward in a little different fashion, asking the federal government to step into a number of spaces. For example, providing Saskatchewan with our $126 million low carbon economy funding, accepting the proposals that we will be putting forward. And then we will all the while ensure that we're protecting the people of this province while adhering with the law of the nation, and ultimately, in different ways, addressing the important conversation around how are we improving our environment, and that includes improving our efforts around climate change.
Follow-up, Kyle?
Yes, with hindsight being 2020, and you sort of addressed this question already, would you have rather spent that $500,000 to $600,000 on either developing Saskatchewan's plan or working with industry to reduce carbon emissions?
No, this is an investment that was made on behalf of not only the people in this province, but the people across this nation in a policy that to this day I disagree that it will not, with the federal government. I do not believe, at least in Saskatchewan's case, that this is a policy that in any way, in any measurable fashion, is going to reduce emissions to any degree that would be satisfactory, even to the folks that have crafted this policy. there's other ways for us to reduce emissions in this province. We're moving forward with our plan of prairie resilience, which was accepted by the federal government as being a plan that will actually reduce emissions here in the province. It's a plan that works with industries to achieve what is achievable, but allowing them to remain competitive in their respective industry and to remain employing people in community after community across this province. So we're going to continue on the climate change conversation. We are going to comply with the law to the extent that we have to, and we will be doing just that. We'd ask the federal government to come forward with the responsibilities that we feel they have, and that is to answer some of the requests that we have to move forward with moving our power and gas corporation under the provincial plan retroactive to January of 2019. We'd ask the federal government that upon our submission of our replacing our federal carbon tax with a made in Saskatchewan solution, that also be accepted like it has been in other provinces. And we would ask them immediately to forward the $126 million that they have provided, an equal amount to all other provinces in the nation. So this was an investment that most certainly was necessary, and I most certainly am very proud to stand up and defend at times the interests of the people that I represent in this great province.
That concludes today's media availability. Thank you for joining us.